Welcome back to Women of Worth, the podcast that inspires and empowers you to navigate life's challenges with grace and resilience. Today, we're exploring a transformative topic that can change how you approach life's toughest moments: emotional agility. What happens when life throws you a curveball? Maybe it's a career setback, a personal loss, or just a weight of everyday stress. Do you find yourself stuck, overwhelmed, or unsure how to move forward? Emotional agility is the key to not just surviving these moments, but thriving through them. In this episode, we'll uncover what emotional agility is, why it's so important for women, and how you can cultivate it to navigate tough times with confidence. We'll share real-life examples, scientific insights, and actionable strategies to help you adapt, grow, and stay true to yourself, no matter what life brings your way. So, grab your favorite drink, find a cozy spot, and join us for an empowering conversation. And before we dive in, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an episode. We'd also love to hear from you in the comments. What's been your greatest lesson in resilience? Let's learn and grow together. Let's begin this journey to discovering your emotional strength and flexibility.
You know, it's like we always say life is full of surprises.
And not all of them are good ones, right?
Especially for women. I feel like there's so much pressure to do it all, have the perfect career, the perfect family.
And somehow manage to look amazing while we're at it.
Right. Laugh it off like it's all easy. But you know what? Today we're diving deep into a topic that can help us not just survive all of that, but actually thrive.
We're talking emotional agility.
Ooh. That sounds kind of like a superpower.
You know, it kind of is. It's like building a mental fitness routine to strengthen those resilience muscles.
Okay, I'm in. Tell me more.
Well, one of the most fascinating things about emotional agility is that it's not about ignoring those difficult emotions.
So we're not aiming for like toxic positivity here.
No, not at all. It's actually the opposite. It's about acknowledging those emotions, understanding where they come from, and then choosing how you want to respond.
In a way that aligns with your values and goals.
Exactly. So you're not letting those emotions control you. You're in the driver's seat.
I love that. So it's not about being happy all the time. Let's be real. That's just not realistic.
Right. It's more about recognizing that emotions, even the tough ones, provide valuable information.
Like they're sending us a signal.
Exactly. And emotional agility is about learning to decipher those signals and using them to your advantage.
You know, it's funny because before we started this deep dive, I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about emotional agility as a superpower. And I was like, yeah, that sounds a little woo-woo. But then I started digging into the research and it turns out there's actually real science backing this up.
Yeah.
Like studies show that people who practice emotional agility, they have lower stress, better mental health, and they're way more adaptable to change.
And that adaptability is key, especially for women, right?
Oh,
If
absolutely.
you think about it, we're constantly switching gears from career woman to partner to mom to friend.
And each role has its own emotional demands.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
It really is. So how does this whole emotional agility thing actually work?
Well, I think it starts with really understanding what emotional agility is and what it isn't.
Okay, lay it on me.
So it's not about suppressing your emotions or putting on a brave face.
Like just pretending everything is okay.
Exactly. Psychologist Dr. Susan David, she's like the pioneer of this concept.
I've heard of her.
She calls it facing your emotions rather than suppressing them or being consumed by them.
So it's more about learning to ride the waves,
Yeah.
not trying to stop the ocean altogether.
That's a great analogy, and the research is super clear on this.
Oh, yeah.
Trying to bottle up your feelings can actually backfire big time.
It's like shaking up a soda bottle.
Exactly. Eventually, it's going to explode.
And that's where the science gets really cool.
Tell me more.
So it turns out that acknowledging your emotions actually changes the way your brain responds to stress.
Wait, so this isn't just some feel-good concept.
Uh.
There's actual neuroscience behind this.
Absolutely. There have been studies that show that when you name your emotions,
Like literally saying out loud, I'm feeling anxious or I'm so frustrated. it actually reduces the activity in the amygdala.
Okay, back up a second. Remind me what the amygdala is.
It's the fear center of your brain.
Oh, right.
So by naming your emotion, it's like hitting the pause button on that whole stress response.
Whoa. So just by putting a name to what we're feeling,
You can actually calm yourself down.
that's amazing.
It's like switching from a panic state to a more analytical one.
Okay, that makes sense.
And that shift allows you to respond to the situation more thoughtfully instead of just reacting on impulse.
I can definitely relate to that. I know I've made some questionable decisions when I've been super stressed out.
We've all been there. Think about a time when you were feeling really overwhelmed.
Oh, I don't have to think too hard about that.
Right, like maybe you had a huge deadline at work or things were chaotic at home.
Or both.
Exactly. Now imagine if in that moment you could just pause, take a breath, and say to yourself, okay, I'm feeling overwhelmed right now.
It's like acknowledging the feeling gives you a little bit of control over it.
Exactly. You're taking the first step towards managing it.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do we know if we're actually struggling with emotional agility?
That's a great question.
Like, what are the signs that maybe we need to work on this a little bit?
Well, and it's important to remember that we're not talking about clinical diagnoses here,
Sure.
but rather common experiences that can signal a need to focus on developing that emotional agility.
Okay, so what are some of those red flags?
Well, do you find yourself feeling constantly stressed out? Or maybe you tend to react impulsively to challenges.
Or maybe you feel stuck in negativity, like you just can't shake off a bad mood.
All of those are signs.
Ooh, that stuck in negativity part definitely sounds familiar.
Yep. And another one is avoiding tough decisions or just suppressing your emotions altogether.
Like you're running away from your feelings instead of facing them head on.
Exactly.
You know, one of the articles I was reading mentioned feeling disconnected from your core values.
Oh, that's a big one.
Like you're living on autopilot instead of making choices that actually reflect what matters most to you.
And that's a crucial point.
Because
Emotional agility isn't just about surviving tough times. It's about thriving in a way that aligns with your authentic self.
I love that.
It's about living a life that feels true to you, even when things get hard.
Okay, so we've talked about what emotional agility is and why it's so important, especially for women.
Right.
But now the big question is, how do we actually cultivate it?
How do we unlock those superpowers and build that resilience?
That's what we're diving into next. Stay tuned.
All right, so where do we even begin with this whole emotional agility thing?
Well, everything I've read says acknowledging your emotions is like step one.
No more sweeping things under the rug.
Right. But it's more than just saying, yep, I'm feeling something.
It's about getting specific, like actually labeling those emotions.
Interesting.
You know, one of the podcasts I was listening to called it emotional granularity.
The emotional one?
Granularity.
Okay, now we're getting all scientific on our feelings.
Well, think of it this way, like saying I'm sad is pretty broad, right?
Okay.
But are you disappointed? Are you hurt? Maybe even a little lonely.
I mean, yeah, those are all different flavors of sad.
Exactly. And they each kind of require a different response, don't they?
That's true. I never really thought about it like that before.
And here's the really fascinating part. This whole labeling process isn't just some mental trick.
There's more.
Oh, yeah. It actually has a real impact on your brain.
Okay, I'm listening.
Remember we talked about the amygdala, that fear center?
Yeah.
Well, studies show that labeling your emotions can actually reduce its activity.
So it's like we're giving our brains a chill pill just by naming what we're feeling.
Pretty much it helps you switch from that panic state to a more analytical one.
And that helps us respond more thoughtfully instead of just, freaking out.
Exactly. All those podcasts had some great examples of this in action.
Oh, yeah, like that small business owner, Rachel.
Right. She was totally panicking about sales being down, but once she pinpointed that she was actually feeling anxious.
She's able to make a plan to address the problem instead of just like spiraling.
Exactly. And then there was Olivia, who was terrified of giving presentations.
Oh, yeah, she was a mess.
But by labeling that fear, she was able to practice and seek feedback, and eventually she was rocking those presentations.
See, that's what I love about these real life examples. It makes it so much more relatable.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've acknowledged the feeling, we've gotten specific about it. What's next on our emotional agility training plan?
This one might feel a little counterintuitive, especially when we're going through tough times, but it's about embracing self-compassion.
Wait, isn't that usually when we're the hardest on ourselves?
It's true, we tend to beat ourselves up with all those shoulds.
Like, I should be handling this better, or why am I so emotional?
But all the research shows that this kind of negative self-talk just makes things worse.
That's the alternative.
Self-compassion. It's about recognizing those struggles without judgment and treating yourself with the same kindness you'd offer a friend.
It's funny because we'd never say to a friend like, oh, get over it, you're being so weak.
Exactly, but we say that stuff to ourselves all the time.
So true.
And the science actually backs this up.
Really?
Yep, studies show that self-compassion can actually boost your emotional well-being and reduce those feelings of failure.
So it's not just about feeling better in the moment, it's about building that long-term resilience.
Exactly. It's like giving yourself a hug instead of a slap on the wrist.
I like that analogy.
Sure.
Do you have any examples of what this looks like in real life?
Sure. One of the podcasts talked about Mia, who was super hard on herself after missing a deadline.
Oh, I hate when that happens.
But instead of dwelling on her mistakes, she reminded herself that everyone messes up sometimes.
And that this one slip-up didn't define her.
Exactly. It's all about progress, not perfection, right?
So true. We all need to hear that sometimes.
Absolutely. And that leads perfectly into another key strategy for cultivating emotional agility, reframing your perspective.
Oh, so it's not just about how we feel, but how we think about those feelings.
You got it. It's about shifting your focus from problems to opportunities for growth.
So instead of asking, why is this happening to me?
You ask, what can I learn from this?
Or how can I use this challenge to become even stronger?
Exactly. And one of the articles I read said that this kind of thinking actually activates the problem-solving center of our brains.
So it's not just about feeling better, it's about actually finding solutions.
Exactly. The research is full of examples of how reframing leads to some pretty amazing outcomes.
Oh yeah, like Tanya, who lost her job.
I remember her story.
At first, she saw it as this huge setback, but then she reframed it as a chance to explore new paths.
And she ended up in a job she was even more passionate about.
Talk about turning lemons into lemonade.
Right. That's emotional agility in action. It's not denying the difficulty, but choosing to see it through a different lens.
And speaking of choices, another key strategy is staying grounded in your values.
Oh, that's so important.
But how do we actually do that?
One of the podcasts recommended identifying your top 3 values
Okay.
and using them as a guide for making decisions.
I like that it's like having a built-in compass for navigating tricky situations.
Exactly. It's about asking yourself, does this choice align with what truly matters to me?
That's a great question to ask.
Like Emily, who was torn between a really demanding promotion and prioritizing family time.
Tough choice.
Right. But she chose to stay in her current role because it better reflected her value of work-life balance.
Sounds like she made a conscious choice to align her actions with what was most important to her.
And that's what emotional agility is all about, making choices that reflect your authentic self, even when they're difficult.
Okay, so far we've got acknowledging those feelings, being kind to ourselves, reframing the situation, and staying true to our values.
Those are some pretty powerful tools.
What other emotional agility secrets can we unlock? So we've got acknowledging our feelings, we're working on the self-compassion thing, we're learning to reframe situations, and we're trying to stay true to those core values.
It's a lot, right?
It is, but it sounds like it's all about building that emotional agility so we can handle whatever life throws our way.
Exactly. And emotional agility isn't just about reacting well in the moment. There's more. It's also about building the capacity to adapt to change because, life is full of surprises.
And those curveballs can really throw us off course.
They can. One of the experts I was reading about called it emotional flexibility.
Emotional flexibility.
Yeah, it's basically being able to roll with the punches.
Makes sense, because if we're too rigid in our thinking, we're bound to snap.
And the research actually shows that emotional flexibility is linked to better mental health overall.
Okay, so it's not just about coping.
Yeah.
It's about actually thriving.
Exactly.
All right, so how do we actually become more emotionally flexible?
Well, one of the articles I read talked about this single mom, Laura, who was constantly feeling overwhelmed.
Oh, I can relate to that.
Right. She was trying to do it all, and she learned to adjust her expectations, especially during those crazy busy weeks.
So instead of aiming for perfection,
She focused on progress.
because let's face it, as women, we often put so much pressure on ourselves to do it all perfectly.
It's true,
Yeah.
but emotional flexibility is about recognizing that some days are just going to be harder than others.
And that's okay.
Exactly. It's about giving yourself a little grace.
I love that. And that brings us to another powerful tool for cultivating emotional flexibility.
Mindfulness.
Mindfulness. Okay, I feel like I hear that word everywhere these days. But what does it actually mean in the context of emotional agility?
Well, it's about being present in the moment without judgment, just noticing your thoughts and feelings without getting swept away by them.
So it's like creating a little space between ourselves and those big emotions so we can observe them rather than being controlled by them.
Exactly. And there's actually a ton of research that backs this up.
Oh, yeah.
Studies have shown that mindfulness can actually reduce your cortisol levels. That's the stress hormone.
Okay. That's good to know.
And it can also strengthen the connection between the emotional and rational parts of your brain.
So it's literally rewiring our brains to be more resilient.
Pretty much. And the best part is there are so many different ways to practice mindfulness.
Like what?
Well, there's deep breathing exercises, meditation, mindful journaling, even just taking a few minutes to really focus on your senses.
It's about finding what works for you and incorporating it into your day.
Exactly. Even just 5 minutes can make a difference.
And speaking of support, everything I've read also stresses the importance of seeking help when we need it.
That's so true. It's easy to feel isolated when you're struggling, but none of us have to go through this alone.
We're not meant to do life alone.
Exactly. Whether it's talking to a trusted friend, a therapist, or joining a support group, reaching out is a sign of strength, not weakness.
It really is. We've covered so much ground here, from what emotional agility is and why it matters, to all those actionable strategies for actually cultivating it.
It's been quite a deep dive.
It really has. So what's the one thing you want our listener to take away from all of this?
I think it's this: you are not your emotions. You are the powerful force who decides how to respond to them. Embrace those tools of emotional agility, and you'll unlock a level of strength and resilience you never knew you had.
And if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like and subscribe and share it with your friends. So for our listeners out there, remember, life is going to throw challenges your way.
It's inevitable.
But with emotional agility as your secret weapon, you've got this.